We had a little malfunction there. I lost my train of thought. It is like I have my degree from North Central University, and you work so hard for it, and then it's just like a $60,000 piece of paper just sitting there
Right.
for the rest of your life.
Well, and that's what I've always told people, the old question, what do you call a doctor that graduates at the bottom of his class? Doctor.
Yeah. So there you go. Well, let's dive into it. 1 Kings chapter 21.
Chapter 21. So this is a new chapter. It's kind of we all know, or most of you know, that the Bible wasn't written with chapters and verses. It was just divided up for our convenience. And so this is really, even though it's a new chapter, it's a continuation of the story with Ahab and Jezebel that have been mentioned before, but it kind of comes back to that story. So it says, verse 1 through 3, sometime later, there was an incident involving a vineyard belonging to Naboth the Jezreelite. The vineyard was in Jezreel, close to the palace of Ahab, king of Samaria. Ahab said to Naboth, "Let me have your vineyard to use as a vegetable garden, since it is close to my palace. In exchange, I will give you a better vineyard, or if you prefer, I will pay you whatever it's worth." But Naboth replied, "The Lord forbid that I should give you the inheritance of my father." So this is sounds like a legitimate real estate deal. So if you just read that verse, it would be like, well, why is Naboth so, adamant that he's not going to let him have his vineyard? And, for Ahab, it would be like, I know when we built your house, you had talked about you'd like to have that lot behind you out there just because it's attached to your property. You'd like to have it, for the boys to have more room to play or whatever, put a horse on it or, But so it was attached, so it was kind of logical. It wasn't like Ahab was, just wanting it because he didn't want somebody else to have it or whatever, or it wasn't an investment. It was attached to his property. So it seems like what would be a decent proposal. And in that case, most of the time people would say, I want to buy your house or I want to buy your land, and what do you want for it? And I'll give you a better house. I'll give you a newer house in trade for it. Or I'll pay, let's get it appraised, and whatever the appraisal comes out, we'll get 3 appraisals, whichever one's the highest, I'll pay you that for it. I mean, sounds like a legitimate real estate proposition.
Okay.
So when it starts out, but and I'm giving you choices. In other words, I'll give you a better one, I'll give you more money for it, whatever the case may be. And his statement is, "The Lord forbid that I should give you the inheritance of my fathers." The Jews, when they came into the Promised Land, were given land as their inheritance. So, I don't know how that worked. I don't know if maybe I could study that in Jewish studies or something. I don't know how it worked. But it does tell us some of the tribes were given different areas and things. But it came down to individuals or families were given land, and they were supposed to keep that land in the family. So it's not, he's saying, I can't sell it to you, or God forbid, may the Lord forbid if I sell. It's like, today, if you would make that statement, I want to buy that lot behind me, and the guy's, the Lord forbid that I should sell. Well, we would just think the guy was being a jerk.
Yeah.
To throw God in there in this transaction or whatever. But in Leviticus 25:23, it says the land is not to be sold permanently. It was to remain with the family that it was given to in the beginning. So it was to be passed down. It was not, if a guy got a piece of land back then, he was not to look at it like, man, I got the best piece of land in all of this area, and I could probably make a killing on that if I would sell it. And that was not the purpose. The purpose was that it stayed with the family. It got the children inherited, the grandchildren inherited. I don't know when that ended. I mean, obviously, it's not that way today.
Yeah.
I mean, land is just sold wherever for whatever.
Yep.
But during that time, that was the and you could sell it. He could have sold it legally, so there wasn't a law per se that said he couldn't sell it, but it was God's law that said he couldn't sell it. And you could sell land during that time in an emergency basis. So if you're Naboth and you have this vineyard and things have been really bad and you haven't been able to sell any crops or whatever off of it, and you're about to go broke and you're hungry, you can temporarily sell a piece of land. In other words, I need money now to provide for my family. You could temporarily sell it, and then it went back when you were able to replace it, or the year of Jubilee when property was returned, and you'd have to go look up all the rules for the year of Jubilee. But it was returned, but it can only be sold under extreme poverty. So this is not the case for Naboth. So he's probably a good man. He doesn't want to violate the law. He's respectful of the ancestors. He's respectful of what God said, the way things should be. And I've used this example before, but we use sometimes, and in this case, he has the law of God, and he said, he's probably looking at it like, I don't know how he's looking, but I could make some money here, or, well, wouldn't God want me to have something better? We make those. How many times has somebody said, I deserve a vacation, and I don't care if I got to put it on the credit card. I don't care if I got to borrow money. I don't care if I got to put my house up for collateral. I deserve a vacation. And we make those decisions like, I deserve it. But I think of how many times we let the government set the moral standards. And I've used this as an example, going to movies. Now, I was raised, you don't go to movies. You don't go to the theater. Right. And you could watch television or whatever, but I wasn't raised. Some of my friends were raised even as kids. They didn't have a TV in the house. That was you just did not do it. It was a sin to have a television in the house. But man, going to a theater would really be, that was on the membership card.
Yeah.
It said you will not go to movies.
Which is true. I was talking to someone the other day in the Assemblies of God, which we're part of, that there were actual cards.
Yeah, there were.
Back in the day.
I wish I would have saved one of them, because
Right.
I think a lot of people don't believe that.
Yeah.
But it had movies, drinking, dancing, gambling, or going to movie theaters, or other places of questionable amusement. That was the way it was worded. So I snuck away.
You have to add no vaping. Still in the process of approval for marijuana. No, I'm just kidding.
Right. But
to be determined.
Yeah. More as culture changes, we'll add to this list. But the movie industry has a rating system that is not Christian based. It's a rating system that whoever, the government or whatever, has put. So we have people who will use that rating system to say, I will only go to PG-13, or I'll only go to PG movies.
Yeah.
Or I'll go to R, but I won't go to X. And that rating system, the Passion of the Christ movie was rated R.
Yeah.
It was rated R for violence.
Right.
I would tell any Christian to go watch that movie.
Yes.
Because the true story of Jesus' crucifixion and his life in those last days was violent story. That's the closest probably that you could ever do to replicate what happened. I don't know. But anyway, we use that system. So I'll only go to PG-13. Well, I've seen PG-13. You be watching it, and it's like it's a decent movie, and then there's a naked woman. Yep. And it's like, what? How does that happen? And so we use the government or whatever, which is what Naboth could have done here. He could have said, well, legally I can sell it, so forget about what God says. And the whole rating system, if we go back to that, the whole rating system, we should be able to say, I'm going to decide based on content, and you can get reviews now that will say this word was used 15 times. There's 2 cases of drug abuse. There's, it'll tell you, and then you can make a decision.
Right. Yep. How many times this word is used, etc.
Right. And I heard somebody say one time that they were talking about the rating system, and they said that you were, how it was determined, you were allowed to say a word a certain number of times before it went. And this was on like a Johnny Carson show or something, and it wasn't one of the, well, they're all bad, but it wasn't one of the really filthy words. But he said, you're only allowed to say this word 3 times within whatever, 2 minutes or whatever it was. And he said, I'll prove it to you. And on the show, he started saying that word. And after the 3rd time, they bleeped him.
Wow.
So he was allowed to say it 3 times before he got bleeped. So
that's what I think Pastor Rachel wants for when I'm speaking, she wants a buzzer. Okay. So you can't say LeBron James. You can't say this. You can't say that.
You would have to somehow, though. We'd have to have a delay on it, or she wouldn't be able to find it. So anyway, well, if we gave everybody beepers in there, it could be a problem. But anyway, we won't keep on with that. But anyway, just making the point that Ahab was a godly man who said, "I don't care what the law says. I'm going to be obedient to what God says." So, verse 4, so Ahab went home sullen and angry. We've talked about this before, because Naboth the Jezreelite had said, I will not give you the inheritance of my fathers. He lay on his bed sulking and refused to eat. Now this is the king. This is not some, can you imagine, and I don't care if it's Donald Trump or Joe Biden or Robert F. Kennedy or who, this is not political, but can you imagine the President of the United States, that we have this, and sometimes we could believe it, but that we have a king who's acting like this. He goes in, I thought about it like a teenager who gets mad at mom and dad because they won't let them go someplace, and they go to their room and slam the door and lay down on the bed, and then it's like, dinner's ready, I'm not hungry, I'm not eating. Like they're going to prove something by that. But I just... the King James says he was heavy and displeased. The Hebrew says he was dejected and upset, thinking, Ahab can't treat me, or Naboth can't treat me like this. Does he not know who I am? But, can you imagine? It makes the point here that sullen and angry, pouting, laying on his bed, refusing to eat over something that he has no right to. Mm-hmm. It's just, it's the same, I've dealt in real estate for a lot of years. It'd be the same thing if I go make an offer on a house and somebody else, gets it at a higher price, and I just go home and go in my bedroom and lay down in my bed mad and angry and sullen and all of that because somebody else got it. We all had a fair chance. I heard somebody say one time, I bought a house at an auction, and somebody said, yeah, the guys at the donut shop were talking about that the other day, and they said, yeah, those real estate agents, they get everything or something. And it's like, it was an auction. Anyone could bid on that property. And so, and Ahab is what the Bible talks about. He's double-minded. Okay. He has this attitude of, I'll serve God, but I still want a little bit of Baal. There's that. And Christians today, a lot of us would say, I'm not like that. Mm-hmm. But I wonder sometimes, and I think we have to question ourselves, do I say one thing and do something else? Do I say something and not follow through with it? That talks about being double-minded. And he was, Ahab, and I don't have the scripture reference, but he would not eat forbidden food. But he married a woman who was, a horrible woman. It's like, well, I won't do this, but then he gave in on something else. And it ruins our witness when we, and none of us are beyond failure, but it ruins our witness when we say something, I won't do this, but then we do something else that's just, that's as bad or whatever. And that talks about being double-minded. And in James it says, a double-minded man is unstable in all his ways.
Wow.
And so if you have that problem, we would kind of link being a hypocrite to that. say one thing, do something else. That's that double-minded spirit, or a little of God but a little of something else. We want it both ways. We want our cake and eat it too.
Yeah,
kind of thing. And so if you're unstable in part of the ways, if you're double-minded in part of the ways, James says you'll be unstable in all of your ways. So if you're the kind of guy who constantly wavers, a little bit of this and a little bit of that, then what do people think when you get in the pulpit and talk about being faithful to your wife? I would think, I don't know whether he's not very faithful over here.
Yeah.
He's not faithful in this way. Why would I believe he would be faithful to his wife? He cheats on his taxes. How would I trust him that he pays his tithes?
Yep.
So that's that double-minded, and I think our witness is important. I have lots of times that it's difficult for me with rental property because I don't know which way to, I don't know what the Christian thing to do to not become the doormat for somebody. And so sometimes it's difficult to get that balance. But I think we all have to ask ourselves, am I double-minded? Am I a hypocrite? Do I say one thing and do something else? Am I preaching at people? Years ago, there was an evangelist, and I'm not mentioning names today. People will know if they've. But there was an evangelist that preached really hard against pornography, against unfaithfulness, and then he was caught in a scandal of pornography and unfaithfulness. And so people, and he still preaches today, and he still has a following. So I'm not saying that everybody's wrong for following him, but I just don't know how you trust someone. It takes a while to get trust back. And I think that is one. I don't know what their program is, but I think the Assemblies has a restoration program. So instead of saying this guy was unfaithful to his wife, you're out of here for eternity.
Right.
It's a restoration process, but this guy that I'm talking about was not willing to submit to that and dropped out of the Assemblies of God because he didn't want to take a year for the restoration process to bring him back in or whatever. So he dropped out of the Assemblies. And so this being double-minded, and especially for pastors, because you have that platform.
Right.
For me here, I have this platform to say things and then not live up to it. And people are looking for that.
Yep.
There's a lot of people who want somebody to fail because it makes them look better. So 21:5-7, his wife Jezebel came in and asked him, "Why are you so sullen? Why won't you eat?" He answered her, "Because I said to Naboth the Jezreelite, 'Sell me your vineyard, or if you prefer, I will give you another vineyard in its place.' But he said, 'I will not give you my vineyard.' Jezebel, his wife, said, 'Is this how you act as king over Israel? Get up and eat, cheer up, I'll get the vineyard of Naboth the Jezreelite.'" This is, she comes in and, well, he wouldn't do that. I can just hear him. If he's that sullen and angry, I can just hear that voice of, crying like a baby, basically. And even Jezebel knows he's acting like an idiot.
Yeah.
Why are you acting? Clearly, you're the king. You're supposed to act different than this. And I don't know, the thing about it, we have all this in writing. I'll bet you Ahab didn't know that all these years later, we'd be sitting here on a podcast talking about how he went in and cried around on his bed and all of that. But and he changed the wording. He says, Ahab says about Naboth, he said, "I will not give you my vineyard." He didn't say "I will not." He said "I cannot," because of the beliefs. And you know that Ahab knows those. He knows the rules and what God has said about those things. So, so he misquoted him basically when he's crying. But he was weak as a king. He was weak as a husband, and he was weak as a man. He let Jezebel come in there. Again, it's the same. I almost got in trouble for this Sunday morning. I had to kind of dig myself out of the hole because I began to talk about the role of men, the role of women, and it would be not even as a man necessarily, but something like this happened, something at the church happened. Somebody criticized you, somebody quit, whatever the case may be. You go home, go in the bedroom, shut the door, laying on the bed, and in comes Pastor Rachel. Now, this is no way, Jeremiah, this is no way for the pastor. You're the pastor. This is no way for you to be acting. And then and you're like, well, this person quit the church and they don't like me. And she's like, I'll take care of it. Well, she shouldn't be taking, as the pastor's wife, as the wife of the house, the mother of the house, whatever, as the lady of, that should not be her responsibility to take care of your problems. And so she's like, I'll take care of that person. And he doesn't even say, oh, well, wait a minute. What are you planning? What are you going to do? I need to make sure you don't do the wrong thing. It wasn't her responsibility to do that. So he's a failure in every way. And I can just hear the words, well, whatever you think is best. He's henpecked. That's the word we would use. And she should have just said to him in that situation, she should have said, don't you have bigger things to worry about? If Rachel came in to the bedroom and you're crying around on the bed about something that happened at the church, she should not be saying.
Nope. That's Pastor H calling right now.
Uh-oh, she's watching. She's calling in to tell me what I'm doing wrong. That's good timing, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I mentioned her name and she came on the phone. But anyway.
That is my office phone.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyway.
We got Alexa dialing in from time to time.
Yeah, I know. You never know what's going to happen here. I thought maybe that was the voice of God.
Yeah.
But it'd be just an angel voice. That's what you should have said. But anyway, if she came in and said, I'll take care of it, she should have said, Pastor, get up off the bed and quit acting like a baby. That's her role, not the role of I'll take care of it for you. And we don't know if he knew anything about the plan or not. But doing it in the name of religion. So let me back up and read 21, 8 through 10. So she wrote letters in Ahab's name, placed his seal on them, and sent them to the elders and nobles who lived in Naboth's city with him. In those letters she wrote, proclaim a day of fasting and seat Naboth in a prominent place among the people, but seat 2 scoundrels opposite him and have them testify that he has cursed both God and the king. Then take him out and stone him to death. Now, we don't know if he knew anything about this plan, but proclaim a day of fasting. So make it sound religious. So she's going to use against Naboth the very thing that he used to say, I can't sell you this because it's an inheritance. She knew that. Ahab knew that. But yet, let's proclaim a fast. That'll sound, spiritual. It'll look spiritual. Because if she had done anything else, Naboth is a godly man. At least we know he's godly enough to want to obey the rules. They were living under law, so it was about rules. So we do know he's godly enough. We don't know a lot about him, but we know he's godly enough in this situation. But proclaim a day of fasting. We don't know who these friends were. But the other issue is, and we'll kind of come back to it, the other issue is Ahab and Naboth are cousins. So you'd have to go back and research who their parents were and how that came about. But they're cousins. So this is not only betrayal of friends or betrayal of acquaintances, but a betrayal of family. So he's part of the family. Jezebel, by marriage, would be part of the family. And so this is a plan really to to have him killed. I mean, that's what the whole idea is. The charges she talks about, she said, say that he cursed God and cursed the king. If you curse God, you're going to incite the people against. If you incite the king, you're going to incite the government. So Jezebel is very conniving. I mean, she knows all the ins and outs. I would say, we read these stories like, okay, Naboth's on the bed or Ahab's on the bed crying. She goes in, I'll take care of it. She goes right out, writes these letters. I think she probably sat down and thought, okay, let me make sure I cover all my bases here. So maybe she looked in the law books. Maybe she looked at things and said, okay, I need to get him this way and I need to get him this way so it'll all look legitimate. I mean, honestly, it sounds like Jesus with the betrayal. Let's see if we can get him this way. It was all an illegal trial against Jesus. I mean, it was an illegal crucifixion. The whole thing was not even done legally or morally right. We get mad because it wasn't morally. Oh, how could they ever do that? I mean, it was an illegal thing that happened then. It was against the laws, the way that they did things. The other thing, if he's killed, so it's talking about cursing God. If he's killed for just blasphemy, his children inherit the land. But if he's killed for blasphemy against the king or criticism against the king, whatever you want to call it, then the king gets the land. So she's got a double protection here. We want him to be against the government is her bottom line. If he's against the government, then the property goes to the king if he dies. So if I have you killed because I'm the king and I have you killed, I get your property.
Praise God.
Instead of the family. So I think that's pretty good. That's a pretty good rule there.
Right.
And this is an interesting, I've talked about this a couple of different times, but the word cursed is not in the original text. So it says that he cursed God and cursed the king. The original word is blessed. Now, so that doesn't make sense. If you back up and look at that, have two scoundrels sit opposite him, have them testify that he has cursed both God and the king. If you say that he has blessed both God and the king, that's like, well, what's the problem with that? Well, the issue was, if you go back to the story of Job, when Job's wife said, why don't you just curse God and die? Mm-hmm. The original text there said, why don't you just bless God and die? So it was a sarcastic statement. Your God, so, well, why don't you just bless your God and die? Mm-hmm. I mean, it was a sarcasm. And the problem was that the belief of the time was that if you pronounced a curse on somebody that you shouldn't have pronounced a curse on, then the curse comes back on you. And so Proverbs 19:28 says, a rascally witness makes a mockery of justice, and the mouth of the wicked spreads iniquity. And there's also a belief that Jezebel had the entire family killed to make sure that there was no inheritance. So
that Jezebel was hardcore, I tell you.
She was hardcore. We talk about Jezebel spirits sometime. Yeah. I always heard it with Jezebel being like Jezebel. Well, she just looks like a Jezebel. Well, it was usually in reference to somebody that was all made up and all their makeup and their lashes and all that. I don't think that's really the Jezebel spirit. I think the Jezebel spirit is conniving and using God's name to try to push the agenda, trying to do. I always call it playing the God card. She was playing the God card. If we do it in the name of religion, and we've talked about it in here. We know that there's all kinds of religions that started out, and then they slowly slipped in these little, you call it drinking the Kool-Aid. Yeah. I mean, we can sit around and say, how in the world could you convince, how in the world could you get in the pulpit of this church and convince this church at some point to drink poison Kool-Aid? Yeah. Now, but you know what? It wasn't like next week you get up and say, hey, if you're followers of Pastor Jeremiah Johnson, then I got some Kool-Aid here for you that, we're all going to go together, and that's not going to happen. But
I'm still trying to get everyone to drink the Mountain Dew, and they're not doing that yet. Very well. Come on.
Now, the best you can do is communion, to get people to drink the juice. So, but it's just, it's that idea that it slowly creeps in. Mm-hmm. If you can get up, and we talked about it before we started this morning, people believe, they trust you, they trust me, and I always tell people, hey, if I say something and it's not, it sounds a little off, or go get your books out, and I'm more than happy to say, hey, I was wrong. I didn't know that. Mm-hmm. And I've asked people before about different things. I bring it up often, but the thing about that there was bells on the robe of the priest when he went in, and they tied a rope around his ankle so they could drag him out if he died in there, because nobody was supposed to go in. I've had at least 3 different ministers say that, and the last one was, I won't mention names, but but the last one was here at the church, and I said, I was not being mean, sarcastic, but I was like, I have looked at that and I can't find it. So I asked him, I said, where did you find that information? Because I said, I can't find it anywhere. And he just stopped, and he's like, well, I guess I just said it because that's what I've heard. Yeah. I've never really looked it up. Mm-hmm. And that's why I tell people, if something sounds fishy,
sure, yep,
then go find it and bring that to me, so I'll know that it's not. Don't just say, well, I don't agree with that. That sounds pretty dumb, but look things up, bring it.
Yeah.
So,
or find someone that agrees with you, and then you feel better about it.
Then you'll be so.
Okay.
And then last of all, Ahab would get it by inheritance because he was a cousin. So if all the kids were killed off or whatever, now you're at the next generation, it would go to the cousin. So she's covering all the bases. She's making sure legally, she's making sure inheritance-wise, all of those areas, she's trying to make sure that what she wants done is going to get done. So I guess the message today is, look at that Jezebel spirit and make sure that we're not, claiming things in the name of Jesus that are just not Jesus.
Right. Yeah.
So, okay, that's it.
Awesome. Guys, thanks for joining us today. This is the Grace Point Daily Podcast, verse by verse. Dr. R.B. Maynard. Join us next time. We'll talk to you guys later.